everyone, and welcome to my channel Cakes by MK. Today I'm going to be showing you guys how to get super sharp edges on your buttercream cake. So stay tuned and I hope you guys enjoy this video. So the first step to this method is to trim the outsides of our cake layers, or what we like to call the crusts on our cakes. And the reason why we do that is because we want our cakes to be a little bit smaller than the cake card that we're going to be putting it on later. So what I've got here today is I've got 3 8-inch chocolate cakes, and I do have the recipe to this on my blog, which I'll post a link to below. So what I'm going to do first is I'm just going to go ahead and trim all the outsides of these 3 cake layers. Alright, now as you can see, we've created a little bit of a mess, so I'm just going to go ahead and clean this up and then we'll be back to ice the cakes. Now that we've trimmed the outsides of our cake layers, we can go ahead and start stacking our cake. Now the way that today is a little bit different is that we're not going to be stacking our cake straight onto a cake stand or a cake board. What we're going to be doing is we're first going to stack it onto a cake card. So this is a cake card, this is what it looks like, and you want a cake card that's the same size as the cake that you baked. So today we've got 8-inch cakes, and so I've got an 8-inch cake card. So let's say you were making 10-inch cakes, then you'd want a 10-inch cake card. And now that we've trimmed the outsides of our cakes are a little bit smaller than the cake card that we're using. So what I'm going to do first is I'm just going to go ahead and start stacking these cakes on here the way that I normally would. I'm filling them with a chocolate Swiss meringue buttercream, and then I'm just going to go ahead and do my first crumb coat. Now if you're not so sure what a crumb coat is or how to stack cake layers, then you can go ahead and check out my tutorial on how to make a layer cake, which I'll post a link to below, and that's a more in-depth tutorial which will take you through the whole process step by step. So now I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to do my crumb coat. Alright, now once you've finished your crumb coat, just make sure that your cake is still in the middle of your cake card. Sometimes it can shift around a little bit as you're icing it. And then after that, we're just going to put it into the fridge for about an hour to completely cool, and then we'll be back to do our final layer of icing. Now that our cake is out of the fridge, we're ready to go ahead and do our final layer of icing. But before we do that, what you want to do is you want to get another cake board or an acrylic disc or anything that you've got at home that's thin and flat and is quite strong. And what we're going to do is we're going to wrap some parchment paper around it. So today I've got an 11-inch acrylic disc. So what you want to keep in mind is that you want whatever you're using to be quite a bit larger than the cake that you've got. So for example, today we've got an 8-inch cake, and so I'm using an 11-inch acrylic disc. And you want to make sure that it's at least a few inches larger, and the bigger it is, the better, because then it means the more space you have to work with your cake later on when we come to using it. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to wrap the parchment paper around it using some sellotape. And you want to make sure that it's really nice and tight, so just give it a good pull before you put your final piece of sellotape on. Alright, now you should end up with something that looks like this. So basically we've just got a nice flat layer with parchment paper on it, and we're going to use that very soon for our cake. But before we do that, we're first going to go ahead and ice the top of our cake. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and put some icing on the top, and we're just going to smooth it out like how we would with a normal layer cake. Now once you've finished smoothing out the top of your cake and it's really nice and flat, what we're going to do next is we're going to grab whatever we wrapped our baking paper around. So for me that's my acrylic board. And the side that's completely covered with the baking paper, we're going to go ahead and put that onto the top of the cake. And you want to make sure that that's right in the middle. And then what you want to do is you just want to push it down so that all of the icing is touching your acrylic disc or cake board or whatever you're using to put on top. Now the next part is a bit of a scary part, because what we're going to do is we're actually going to flip the whole cake around and then put it back onto our turntable. Alright, now we've successfully turned our cake around, and what you want to do next is you want to take off your cake board or whatever your cake was resting on, and you want to just be left with the cake card that we started with right at the beginning. And now what we want to do next is you want to put buttercream all around the edges of the cake. Now once the cake is fully covered with buttercream, what we're going to do next is we're going to grab our cake scraper and we're going to scrape around our cake until we get really nice smooth edges. And as we do that, we're going to use the cake card, which is at the top, as kind of like a guide for us to keep our cake scraper really nice and straight. And as you're scraping the cake, if you notice that there's some holes in the buttercream, then just go ahead and put more icing on it and just keep scraping until you're happy with the look. Alright, now once you're happy with the sides, what we're going to do next is we're going to put it into the fridge for at least 2 hours. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna come back, we're gonna flip it over again, and then we're gonna take the parchment paper off. So our cake's out of the fridge now. It was in there for about 3 hours. Our icing is really nice and firm, so we're ready to go ahead and put our cake onto our cake board. So what I'm going to do first is I'm just going to get a little bit of the buttercream and I'm going to put it into the middle of the cake board, and that's going to act as the glue that's going to keep our cake stuck to our cake board. Alright, now we're ready to put the cake onto the cake board now, and the way that I'm going to do that is I'm just going to gently grab the cake, I'm going to flip it over, and then I'm going to put it into the middle of the cake board. And you can kind of just use the top to help you move the cake a little bit if it's not quite in the middle. So now that our cake's in the middle of the cake board, we're going to go ahead and gently remove the baking paper off the top of the cake now. Alright, now what you can see is we've got some really nice sharp edges on our cake now, and the last thing we're going to do is just go ahead and fill in any holes in the middle with some more buttercream, and then we're going to smooth it out, and then we're done. So I've smoothed the top of the cake out, and now just before I finish, I noticed that when I put my cake onto the cake board, there were a few little kind of cracks which showed up on the bottom, and so I'm just going to go and clean those up with a small offset spatula, and then we're all done. And there we are, our cake with our super sharp edges is complete. I hope you guys enjoyed that video on how to make a buttercream cake with super sharp edges. Please like and subscribe for more videos like this, and don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you'll be updated whenever I upload a new video. Thanks again, and we'll see you guys next time.